The morning started like any other in the grand halls of the Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of worlds filed into their assigned seats, their various forms of communication filling the air with clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. The massive chamber could hold 10,000 beings, though today only about half the seats were filled for what everyone expected to be another routine session. Ambassador Lisa Carter should have been in seat 247A, representing Earth and its colonies. Her chair sat empty. The human section, which usually buzzed with quiet activity, was completely silent. Not a single human could be seen anywhere in the chamber. Chairman Vextar, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, called the session to order. His voice echoed through the chamber as translation devices converted his words into hundreds of different languages. He barely glanced at the empty human section. Humans were always late to something, he thought. They probably got distracted by some minor crisis again. 3 hours into the session, the empty human seats became harder to ignore. High Counselor Thessana, representing the powerful Zephyrian Federation, finally spoke up during a break in discussions about mining rights. "Where are the humans today?" she asked, her voice carrying the musical tone that all Zephyrians used when speaking. They were quite vocal about these mining regulations last week. Chairman Vextar waved one of his 4 hands dismissively, probably staging another one of their dramatic protests. You know how emotional they get about business matters. Several other council members made sounds that could have been laughter. The amphibious Cathani delegate Gurgol made a wet gurgling sound that translated as agreement. Humans are always unpredictable. Remember when they walked out over the fishing rights debate 3 months ago? They came back the next day with a full proposal. But as the day wore on, the human absence became more noticeable. During the lunch break, curious delegates wandered over to the human embassy section of the station. The offices were dark. Security guards reported that no humans had entered or left the building that morning. Dr. Helen Brooks, a human scientist who had been working on the joint terraforming project for 5 years, was nowhere to be found. Her lab was clean and organized, but all her personal items were gone. Her research notes were filed neatly in the computer system, but she had left no message about where she was going. Captain Ryan Mitchell, who commanded the human fleet stationed near the Council's main base, had not responded to routine communications all day. His ships were still there, floating in their assigned positions, but they were not answering calls. By evening, it became clear that something unusual was happening. Every human on the station had vanished. Not just the diplomats and politicians, but the engineers, doctors, traders, and even the maintenance workers. The human quarter of the station, which housed nearly 3,000 people, was completely empty. Chairman Vextar called an emergency meeting. Representatives from the major powers gathered in a smaller conference room. The mood was confused, rather than worried. "This is clearly some kind of coordinated protest," declared High Counselor Thessana. "Humans love their grand gestures. They are probably trying to make a point about the new trade restrictions. But they did not file any formal complaints," pointed out Delegate Mortek from the Centaurian Alliance. "Usually they flood us with documents before they do anything dramatic." Gurgol made another wet sound. "Maybe they finally realized they were not as important as they thought. Good riddance, I say. We managed fine before they showed up 50 years ago." The next morning brought more disturbing news. Human colonies throughout the galaxy had gone silent. Not destroyed or damaged, just quiet. They stopped responding to communications from other worlds. Trade ships approaching human space found empty border stations with automated messages, directing them to archived diplomatic channels. Commander Jake Morrison, who had served as military liaison between human forces and the Council defense fleet, had disappeared along with all his staff. His office contained a single note that read, "All current projects have been transferred to appropriate departments. Thank you for the cooperation." Amanda Foster, the chief human diplomat who had negotiated dozens of important treaties, left behind only a clean desk and a computer with all files properly organized and labeled. No personal message, no explanation, just professional courtesy taken to its logical extreme. The human cargo ships that moved goods between worlds simply stopped showing up at their scheduled destinations. Captain Tony Reynolds, who ran supplies, to the outer mining colonies never arrived with his monthly delivery. His ship was not destroyed or captured. It just never came. Dr. Kevin Walsh, who had revolutionized cross-species medicine at the Central Medical Station, left behind detailed instructions for maintaining his equipment and caring for his patients. But the instructions were written as if he never planned to return. Within 72 hours, it became clear that every human in council space had left. Not just the important ones, but all of them. The janitor who cleaned the council chambers was gone. The cook who ran the popular human restaurant on level 15 had closed up shop. Even the human children who attended the integrated schools had vanished with their families. More troubling was what happened next. Long-range scanners showed human ships leaving council space from dozens of different points. But they were not heading back toward Earth or the known human colonies. They were going in directions that led to unexplored space as if they had somewhere else to go. Attempts to contact Earth directly met with automated responses. The messages were polite but unhelpful. The Terran government appreciates your interest. Please direct all future correspondence to archived diplomatic channels. Thank you for your understanding. Even stranger, human colonies that had been established for decades suddenly cut all ties with non-human governments. New Boston, which had been a major trade hub, simply stopped accepting visitors from other species. The orbital stations around human worlds went dark, not because they were damaged, but because they had switched to some kind of communication system that council technology could not detect. Chairman Vextar found himself staring at dozens of empty seats in the council chamber. The human section looked like a mouth with missing teeth. For the first time in 50 years, there were no human voices in the debates. No human proposals to consider, no human objections to address. This is just a temporary situation, he announced to the remaining delegates. Humans are emotional creatures. They will calm down and return when they realize they need us more than we need them. High Counselor Thesana nodded in agreement. Their technology is impressive but primitive. They cannot survive long without our advanced knowledge and established trade networks. Delegate Mortek was less certain. They seemed to leave very organized. This was not an angry departure, it was planned. Gurgol made his gurgling laugh again. Planned or not, they will be back. Where else can they go? We control the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They are just children playing at being independent. But as the days passed and the silence from human space continued, some delegates began to wonder if they had made a mistake. The humans had not left in anger or protest. They had left quietly and completely, as if they had simply decided that the Galactic Council was no longer worth their time. The realization that this might be permanent was still weeks away. For now, the Council continued its business as usual, confident that the humans would eventually come crawling back. After all, what could they possibly accomplish on their own? 3 weeks after the humans disappeared, Director Zephox stood on the observation deck of Mining Station Alpha 7 and watched his empire crumble. The massive asteroid field that had made him rich stretched out before him, but the extraction ship sat motionless among the rocks like dead insects. The problem was simple but devastating. Every piece of mining equipment had been designed or modified by human engineers. The quantum drills that could slice through solid metal like butter needed constant calibration. The gravity manipulators that moved house-sized chunks of ore required daily maintenance. The automated sorting systems that separated valuable materials from worthless rock had to be reset every few hours. For 20 years, human technicians had handled all of this. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez had run the main operations center, with a team of 40 human specialists. They made the complex systems work so smoothly that Zephox had barely noticed them. Now he noticed their absence every second of every day. "Sir, we have another breakdown in Sector 12, reported his Altarian assistant. "The thermal regulators are overheating again." Zephox made a frustrated growling sound. This was the 15th equipment failure this week. His alien engineers were smart and well-trained, but they could not figure out the human modifications. The original alien technology was reliable but slow. The human improvements had made everything 10 times faster, but they required knowledge that only humans possessed. "How long to repair it?" he asked. Unknown, sir. We are still trying to understand how the human cooling system works. The Rigelian Mining Consortium, which Zephox controlled, operated 47 mining stations across 7 star systems. All of them were having the same problems. Billion credit operations were shutting down one by one because nobody could maintain the human-designed equipment. But mining was just the beginning of the galaxy's problems, Captain. Trevon commanded a cargo freighter that carried supplies between the inner worlds and the frontier colonies. For 15 years, his route had been perfectly organized by the Human Shipping Authority. Captain Maria Santos and her team had created a system that moved cargo ships through space like a carefully choreographed dance. Every ship knew exactly when to arrive at each station. Loading and unloading happened on precise schedules. Fuel depots were positioned at exactly the right distances. The system moved millions of tons of cargo every day with almost no delays or accidents. Now, chaos ruled the shipping lanes. Without human coordination, cargo ships arrived at stations that were already full. Goods piled up at some locations while other places ran out of basic supplies. Fuel depots ran empty because nobody had calculated the new demand patterns. "We are 3 days behind schedule," Trevon's navigator reported. "The orbital station at Kepler 442b cannot accept our cargo until next week." "What about the alternate delivery point?" Trevon asked. "Full up, sir. They have 17 ships waiting in line ahead of us." Shipping costs had tripled in 3 weeks. Delivery times that used to be measured in days now took weeks or months. Several frontier colonies had already declared supply emergencies. The smooth flow of galactic commerce was turning into a series of expensive traffic jams. The military situation was even worse. General Kessitar of the Zephyrian Defense Force stood in his command center and stared at tactical displays that he no longer fully understood. For decades, human military advisors had worked alongside alien officers, teaching them new ways to think about warfare. General Paul Harrison had revolutionized Zephyrian battle tactics. Strategic analyst Claire Murphy had trained thousands of officers in what she called adaptive response theory. The humans had introduced ideas like flexible command structures, rapid deployment, and multi-species cooperation. Most importantly, they had taught alien forces how to fight pirates and raiders. The criminal gangs that plagued the outer systems used hit-and-run tactics that traditional alien military doctrine could not handle. Human advisors had developed new strategies specifically designed to counter fast, unpredictable enemies. Now the pirates were getting bolder. The notorious Void Runners had attacked 3 merchant convoys in the past week. Each time, the defending security forces had responded exactly as they had been trained to do 5 years ago, before human tactical innovations. Each time, the pirates had easily outmaneuvered them. "Sir, we have another distress call from the Centauri shipping lanes," reported Communications Officer Veltar. "Response time?" General Kessitar asked. 4 hours at best, sir. By the time we arrive, the pirates will be long gone." "Recommendations?" Veltar hesitated. "Colonel Sam Roberts always said we should position fast patrol ships at the jump points instead of relying on large response fleets. But we never learned how to calculate the proper positioning." General Kessitar closed his eyes. Colonel Roberts had been the human military advisor assigned to his command. The human had tried to teach them his methods, but most Zephyrian officers had been too proud to pay close attention. They had assumed they could figure out the details later if they needed to. Later had arrived, and they were helpless. The medical crisis was perhaps the most heartbreaking. Dr. Torvas ran the largest hospital on the Council's central station. For years, he had worked alongside human doctors who specialized in cross-species medicine. Humans had a unique talent for understanding how different alien biologies interacted. Dr. Lisa Kim had developed treatments for diseases that affected multiple species living in close contact. Dr. Kevin Walsh had invented surgical techniques that worked on both silicon-based and carbon-based life forms. Their research had saved thousands of lives and made it possible for different species to live and work together safely. Now Dr. Torvas faced medical emergencies he could not handle. A Kithani trader had developed an infection that was spreading to the human bacteria in his digestive system. 3 months ago, this would have been a routine treatment. Now Dr. Torvas did not even know where to begin. The symptoms are getting worse, his assistant reported. The patient's temperature is rising and the infection is spreading to his respiratory system. What about the human medical databases? Dr. Torvis asked. We can access the basic information, sir, but the advanced treatment protocols require knowledge we do not have. Dr. Kim's notes mention specific drug combinations, but she never explained how she calculated the dosages for mixed species physiology. The patient was dying, and there was nothing they could do except watch and hope. Similar cases were appearing at medical facilities throughout council space. Mixed crews on long-haul cargo ships were particularly vulnerable, since they often developed cross-species health problems that only human doctors had known how to treat. In the council chambers, emergency sessions were becoming daily events. Chairman Vextar found himself dealing with crisis reports from every corner of the galaxy. The Centaurian colonies are reporting food shortages, announced Delegate Mortek. Their agricultural systems are failing without human maintenance support. The Regellian Mining Consortium has suspended operations at 37 facilities, added another representative. They claim they cannot maintain human-modified equipment. High Counselor Thessana stood up, her musical voice strained with frustration. This is unacceptable. We cannot allow our entire civilization to depend on one species. There must be alternatives. What alternatives? Demanded Gurgol, the Cathani delegate. Do you know how to fix a quantum mining drill? Can you calculate shipping routes for 10,000 cargo vessels? Can you treat a patient with mixed species infections? The chamber fell silent. The uncomfortable truth was that none of them possessed the knowledge that humans had provided so effortlessly for decades. We need to contact them, Chairman Vextar finally said. Send envoys to human space, offer them concessions, find out what they want. We tried, replied the communications officer. All our messages received the same automated response. Please direct correspondence to archive diplomatic channels. We cannot even get through to a living person. Then send a ship, ordered the chairman. A diplomatic vessel with full authority to negotiate. Sir, human space is completely dark. We do not know where their ships went or which colonies are still inhabited. We have no idea where to send diplomats. The reality was slowly sinking in. The humans had not just left the council. They had vanished so completely that nobody knew how to find them, and without them, the advanced galactic civilization that had taken centuries to build was falling apart in a matter of weeks. The galaxy was learning a painful lesson about the difference between primitive technology and primitive thinking. The humans might have seemed less advanced than their alien neighbors, but their minds worked in ways that had made everyone else's lives better. Now that those minds were gone, the true scope of their contribution was becoming impossible to ignore. 6 months after the humans disappeared, Station Manager Kolvan stood in the control center of Nexus Trade Hub and watched his world die. The massive station had once been the busiest commercial center in known space. Cargo ships from hundreds of worlds had docked here every day, trading everything from rare metals to exotic foods. Now the vast docking bays sat mostly empty. Of the 500 berths available, only about 60 were occupied. The cargo processing centers that used to run around the clock were operating with skeleton crews. The merchant districts that had buzzed with activity from dozens of species were quiet and dim. The problem was not just the missing human ships, though that was bad enough. The real disaster was that nobody could run the station properly without human expertise. Station Manager Pete Johnson had made everything work smoothly for 12 years. He had understood how to coordinate thousands of arrivals and departures, how to manage the complex cargo sorting systems, and how to keep trade flowing efficiently between species that barely understood each other. His replacement, a well-meaning Altarian administrator named Zektun, was drowning in problems he could not solve. The computer systems that tracked cargo were crashing daily. The translation protocols that helped different species communicate were producing nonsense. The maintenance robots that kept the station clean and functional were malfunctioning because nobody understood their programming. Sir, we have another system failure in Cargo Bay 17, reported his assistant. The automated sorting equipment is putting Centaurian grain in containers, marked for Zephyrian crystal shipments. Colvin rubbed his forehead with 3 of his hands. This was the kind of mistake that could cause serious diplomatic problems. Centaurian grain was considered sacred by some species and poisonous to others. Mixing it with crystal shipments could start a trade war. "How long to fix it?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. We are still trying to understand how the human programming works. The code is written in a way that seems simple but does things we cannot figure out." This was happening throughout the galaxy. Human programmers had designed systems that appeared straightforward but contained layers of complexity that other species could not grasp. They had created solutions that worked perfectly until they stopped working, and then nobody else knew how to repair them. The pirate problem was getting much worse. Captain Vorak of the Void Runners had discovered that the galaxy's security forces were helpless without their human advisors. His raids were becoming bolder and more frequent, and other criminal organizations were following his example. The merchant ship, Lucky Strike, sent out a distress call as Vorak's ships surrounded it in the Kepler system. The nearest security patrol was 3 hours away, following standard response protocols that had been outdated for years. By the time they arrived, the pirates were long gone with valuable cargo and several crew members. Commander Thexel of the DICE Kepler Defense Force received the bad news in his office. This was the 4th successful pirate attack in his sector this month. His superiors were demanding explanations he could not provide. "What about the new patrol patterns Colonel Roberts suggested?" asked his aide. "I have the reports he filed, but they do not make sense to me," Commander Thexel admitted. He talked about predictive positioning and adaptive response grids. "The mathematics behind his recommendations are too complex for our tactical computers." The human military advisors had not just taught alien forces what to do. They had taught them how to think differently about warfare. They had introduced concepts like flexibility, improvisation, and rapid adaptation that most alien military traditions did not include. Without that knowledge, the galaxy's security forces were falling back on old methods that pirates could easily predict and counter. Crime rates were rising across all sectors as word spread that the authorities were no longer effective. On the agricultural world of New Eden, the terraforming project was collapsing. The planet had been humanity's most ambitious attempt to create a perfect world where multiple species could live together. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez had spent 8 years fine-tuning the atmospheric processors, weather control systems, and ecological balance mechanisms. The planet was supposed to be a paradise. The air was clean and breathable by most species. The weather was mild and predictable. The soil was rich and fertile. Millions of colonists from dozens of worlds had made New Eden their home. Now the carefully balanced systems were falling apart. The atmospheric processors required daily adjustments that the automated systems could not handle. Without constant fine-tuning, the air composition was becoming unstable. Some areas were developing too much oxygen, creating fire hazards. Other regions were losing oxygen entirely, making them dangerous for most life forms. Environmental engineer Tazara watched her monitoring screens with growing alarm. The readings were getting worse every day and she had no idea how to fix them. "The western continent is showing dangerous carbon dioxide levels," her assistant reported. "The eastern seaboard has too much nitrogen. The polar regions are developing toxic gas pockets." "What about the backup systems?" Tessara asked. "They are running, but they were designed to handle minor fluctuations, not complete atmospheric rebalancing." Engineer Rodriguez's notes mentioned something called cascade harmonics, but we cannot understand what he meant. The evacuation notices had already been posted. Within 6 months, New Eden would be uninhabitable unless someone could figure out how to restart the terraforming systems. Millions of people would lose their homes because nobody could understand the technology that had created their world. The communication crisis was perhaps the most frightening development. The galactic communications network had allowed instant translation between hundreds of languages and communication methods. Species that had evolved on different worlds with completely different ways of expressing ideas could understand each other perfectly. The system had been designed by human programmers like tech specialist Nancy Palmer. They had created translation algorithms that could handle not just words but concepts, emotions, and cultural references. The network had made galactic civilization possible by allowing different species to truly communicate. Now the system was breaking down. Without constant updates and maintenance, the translation protocols were becoming less accurate. Simple concepts were being mistranslated. Complex ideas were becoming completely garbled. Diplomatic messages that should have been routine were causing confusion and offense. Ambassador Mortek of the Centaurian Alliance discovered this problem during a routine trade negotiation with the Rigelian Consortium. What should have been a simple discussion about mineral rights turned into a heated argument when the translation system converted his polite suggestion into what sounded like a threat of military action. "I said we would be pleased to consider your proposal," he explained to his confused counterpart. "How did that become, we will destroy your mining facilities?" The technical staff could not explain the malfunction. The translation databases were still intact, but the logic systems that processed meaning were producing increasingly strange results. Languages were drifting apart as the network lost the ability to bridge the gaps between different ways of thinking. In the council chambers, emergency sessions had become permanent. Representatives from across the galaxy reported new disasters every day. Chairman Vextar found himself managing a crisis that seemed to grow worse, no matter what they tried to do. "The Zarion Defense Coalition is requesting immediate military assistance," announced General Kessatar. "Pirate activity in their sector has increased by 400%. The Agricultural Ministry reports crop failures on 17 worlds," added another representative. "Human-designed irrigation systems are malfunctioning without proper maintenance." "We have confirmed reports of 3 more colonies requesting evacuation assistance," said Ambassador Thessana. "Their life support systems are failing." Delegate Gurgol made his wet gurgling sound, but it no longer sounded like laughter. "How long can this continue? Our entire civilization is falling apart." "We need to find them," Chairman Vextar declared. "Send exploration ships to search human space. Offer them anything they want. Full council membership with voting rights. Control over trade routes. Access to our most advanced technology." "Sir," interrupted the communications officer, "we tried sending a diplomatic ship toward Earth last month. It never returned. We lost contact with it at the edge of human space." "What do you mean, lost contact?" "The ship sent routine reports until it reached the boundary of former human territory. Then nothing. No distress signal, no final message, no wreckage. It simply disappeared." The chamber fell silent. The implications were disturbing. Either something terrible was happening to ships that entered human space, or the humans had developed technology that could make entire vessels vanish without a trace. "Send another ship," ordered the chairman. "Send 10 ships if necessary." "Sir, we have sent 4 more ships since then. None have returned. Whatever is happening in human space, it appears that once you enter, you cannot leave." The reality was becoming clear. The humans had not just left the council. They had made themselves completely unreachable. 2 years after the humans vanished, Dr. Velen stood over the dying body of a young Centaurian child and felt completely helpless. The girl had developed a condition that should have been easily treatable. 6 months ago, he would have called Dr. Roy Carter at the Galactic Health Institute. The human doctor would have arrived within hours with the right medicine and the knowledge to save her life. Now Dr. Carter was gone, along with all his research and expertise. The medical equipment he had designed was still running, but nobody understood how it worked. The medicines he had created were running out, and nobody knew how to make more. The treatment procedures he had developed were written down in files, but the files did not explain the thinking behind his decisions. "Her condition is getting worse," reported Nurse Colvia. "The fever is not responding to standard treatments." Dr. Velen looked at the medical scanner readings. They showed the same pattern he had seen in dozens of cases over the past year. Mixed species infections that spread between different types of biology, living in the same environment. Before the humans left, this had been a minor problem with simple solutions. Now it was a death sentence. "What about the human medical database?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "I checked, Doctor. There are records of similar cases, but the treatment notes require knowledge of human biochemistry that we do not have. Dr. Carter's files mentioned drug combinations and dosage calculations, but he never explained how he determined what would work for each patient." The child's parents stood nearby, their large eyes filled with hope that Dr. Velen could not fulfill. They had traveled across 3-star systems to reach his hospital because it was supposed to be the best medical facility in the sector. 2 years ago, that had been true. Now it was just another place where people came to die from diseases that humans could have cured easily. This scene was repeating itself throughout the galaxy. The advanced medical techniques that had made interspecies civilization possible were being forgotten as equipment failed and supplies ran out. Diseases that had been eliminated for decades were returning. The infant mortality rate among mixed species families was rising rapidly. On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Professor Zexitar stared at equations that might as well have been written in an alien language. In a way, they were. Professor Beth Stevens, the human scientist who had been leading the quantum mechanics research project, had filled hundreds of pages with calculations that promised revolutionary breakthroughs. In faster-than-light travel, her work had been on the verge of changing everything. The theories she developed could have led to instant communication across galactic distances, teleportation technology, and energy sources that would make current power systems look like campfires. The potential applications were limitless. But her notes were written in a way that only other human scientists could understand. She had used mathematical concepts that seemed simple, but contained layers of meaning that other species could not grasp. Her colleagues from different worlds had sat in her lectures and nodded as if they understood, but none of them had truly followed her reasoning. "Have you made any progress with the quantum field equations?" asked his research assistant. "Professor," Zexitar gestured helplessly at the screens full of numbers. "I understand the individual components, but I cannot see how she connected them. Her logic jumps from one concept to another in ways that do not make sense to me. It is as if she could see patterns that are invisible to the rest of us." "What about the other research teams? Are they having better luck?" "No. We have contacted every major scientific institution in the galaxy. Nobody can continue her work. We have the most advanced minds of dozens of species, and we are all equally lost." The implications were staggering. Humanity had been on the edge of discoveries that could have advanced galactic civilization by thousands of years. Now that knowledge was locked away in notes that nobody else could understand, like treasure buried with a map written in a dead language. Military disasters were becoming more common and more severe. General Kessitar received the report of the latest defeat with growing despair. The Zephyrian Defense Force had lost an entire battle group to insurgents on the Outer Rim. Rebel forces that should have been easily defeated had outmaneuvered his ships using tactics that seemed impossible. "How did they do it?" he asked his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. They used hit-and-run attacks that appeared random but were actually coordinated in a pattern we could not predict. Our response followed standard battle doctrine, but they seemed to know exactly what we would do before we did it." General Kessitar closed his eyes and thought about Colonel Sam Roberts. The human military advisor had tried to teach Zephyrian officers how to think like their enemies, how to adapt their strategies in real time, how to be unpredictable. Most of his lessons had seemed like common sense at the time. Now they seemed like wisdom from another world. "What about the tactical manuals Colonel Roberts prepared?" he asked. "We have studied them extensively, sir, but they do not work the same way when we try to use them. The human approach to warfare requires a type of flexibility that our military training does not include. We are taught to follow procedures and maintain discipline. The humans taught us to break rules and make quick decisions based on incomplete information. The rebel forces, meanwhile, were using captured human weapons and tactics with devastating effectiveness. Human military equipment had been designed to be adaptable and user-friendly. In the wrong hands, it was proving to be incredibly dangerous." Agricultural disasters were creating the first interstellar refugee crisis in centuries. The planet Kepler 438b had been one of the most successful farming worlds in the galaxy, thanks to irrigation systems designed by human engineer Joe Martinez. His sustainable farming techniques had turned a desert world into a garden that fed billions of people across multiple star systems. Now the carefully balanced ecosystems were collapsing. The irrigation systems required constant adjustments based on weather patterns, soil conditions, and crop growth cycles. The automated systems could handle routine maintenance, but they could not make the complex decisions that kept everything working together. Farm manager Torval watched his fields turn brown despite having plenty of water and fertile soil. The problem was not the amount of water, but the timing and distribution. The human-designed systems had delivered the right amount of water to the right places at exactly the right times. Without that precision, the crops were either drowning or dying of thirst. "Sir, the eastern fields are showing signs of root rot," reported his agricultural supervisor. "The western crops are wilting despite adequate irrigation." "What about the backup systems?" Torval asked. "They are running, but they use simple timers instead of the adaptive algorithms engineer Martinez installed. The crops are not getting what they need when they need it." Within months, Kepler 438b would go from feeding billions to needing food aid. Similar agricultural collapses were happening on dozens of worlds. The refugee ships were already beginning to arrive at overcrowded stations and colonies, bringing hungry families who had nowhere else to go. The political situation was becoming desperate. In the council chambers, representatives who had once worked together were now blaming each other for the crisis. The Altarian Republic was threatening to withdraw from the council unless humans were found and convinced to return. The Zephyrian Federation was demanding access to secret human research files. The Keithani Collective was considering declaring martial law in their territory. Chairman Vextar found himself trying to hold together an alliance that was falling apart from internal pressure. Emergency meetings had become shouting matches. Diplomatic protocols were breaking down as translation errors caused misunderstandings that led to arguments. "The situation is unacceptable," declared High Counselor Thesana. "We cannot continue to watch our civilization collapse while we do nothing." "What do you suggest?" asked Chairman Vextar. "We have sent 12 ships to search for humans. None have returned. We have offered every concession we can think of. They do not respond to our messages." Delegate Gurgle made his wet gurgling sound, but it was filled with frustration instead of amusement. "Maybe they do not want to be found. Maybe they have decided we are not worth their time." "That is impossible," insisted Ambassador Mortek. "They need us as much as we need them. Where else can they get the resources and knowledge of advanced civilizations? Do they?" asked Gurgle quietly. "We assumed they needed us because they seemed less advanced. But what if we were wrong? What if they were holding back instead of catching up?" The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this possibility. It was a disturbing thought. Everyone had assumed that humans were the junior partners in galactic civilization, learning from their more experienced neighbors. But the evidence was pointing in a different direction. The humans had not just provided manual labor and simple services. They had solved problems that the most advanced alien minds could not handle. They had created technologies that other species could use but not understand. They had developed ideas that seemed obvious in hindsight but had never occurred to anyone else. 5 years after the humans disappeared, Communications Officer Yelvan detected something that made her hands shake as she reached for the emergency alert button. A single ship had appeared at the edge of Council space. The energy signature was unmistakably human. Chairman Vextar rushed to the control center with half the council behind him. They had been waiting for this moment for 5 long years. Finally, the humans were coming back. Finally, they could negotiate and fix the disasters that had been tearing the galaxy apart. The ship was small and elegant, with design features that seemed both familiar and strangely advanced. It moved with a grace that made even the most sophisticated council vessels look clumsy. Captain Laura Evans announced herself and requested permission to deliver a message to the assembled council. "Permission granted," Chairman Vextar said quickly. "Please dock at the main diplomatic bay. We have much to discuss." "That will not be necessary," Captain Evans replied. Her voice was calm and professional. "This is a delivery only. We will transmit the message and depart." "Wait," Chairman Vextar pleaded. "We need to talk. The galaxy has been struggling without human expertise. We are prepared to offer significant concessions." "The message will explain everything, Captain," Evans said. "Please prepare to receive transmission." The recording that appeared on the main screen showed former Ambassador Lisa Carter standing in what looked like a garden. Behind her, unfamiliar plants swayed in an alien breeze under a sky that was the wrong color. She looked older but healthier, as if the years had been kind to her. "To the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying the same diplomatic tone she had used in 1,000 negotiations. "This message represents humanity's final official communication with your organization." Chairman Vextar felt his stomach drop. Final communication. Not a negotiation, not a list of demands, but a goodbye. For 50 years, humanity participated in galactic civilization as junior partners, Ambassador Carter continued. We were told, repeatedly, that our contributions were crude, primitive, or insignificant. Our innovations were dismissed as lucky accidents. Our warnings were ignored as emotional overreactions. Our cultural values were mocked as childish idealism. The assembled council members shifted uncomfortably. They remembered making those statements, but they had seemed reasonable at the time. Humans had appeared less advanced than their alien neighbors. Their technology had looked simpler. Their methods had seemed unscientific. You called us too emotional to understand complex diplomatic situations, too aggressive to be trusted with advanced weapons, too unpredictable to be included in important decisions. You treated us like gifted children who needed constant supervision from our wiser elders. High Counselor Thesana wanted to object, to explain that it had not been personal, that they had simply been following logical protocols, but the evidence of the past 5 years made such explanations sound hollow. "We have accepted your assessment," Ambassador Carter said, and there was something in her tone that sent chills through the watching aliens. "If humanity is too primitive for galactic civilization, then we clearly do not belong among you. We have graduated from your tutelage and no longer require supervision." The transmission showed images of human colonies in distant space, but these were not the rough frontier settlements that Council Scouts remembered. These were gleaming cities that floated among the stars, with architecture that defied conventional understanding of physics. Gardens and forests grew in impossible spirals around structures that seemed to bend space itself. "We leave behind the systems we built, the knowledge we shared, and the friendships we forged," the ambassador continued. "We bear no ill will toward the species we worked alongside. We simply recognize that our paths have diverged." More images appeared. Massive construction projects that dwarfed anything in Council space, ships that moved without visible propulsion, systems, energy collectors that surrounded entire stars, technologies that looked like magic but operated with scientific precision. Humanity has made contact with other young species throughout the galaxy. We are sharing our knowledge and building new alliances based on cooperation rather than hierarchy. We have discovered that the universe is much larger and more diverse than the small corner you control. The final blow came with images of human ships appearing in distant galaxies. While the Council had spent millennia slowly expanding through a single galactic arm, humanity had developed faster than light travel that made intergalactic exploration possible. They had not just left Council space. They had left the galaxy entirely. To the species watching this message, we offer one piece of advice. Do not let anyone convince you that you are too primitive to have good ideas. Do not let fear of making mistakes prevent you from trying new approaches. The universe rewards curiosity and courage, not age and caution. Ambassador Carter smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young diplomat who had first arrived at the Council chambers decades ago. "We wish you well in your future endeavors. Humanity will remember our time among you fondly, as a necessary stage in our development. We hope you will remember us the same way." The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in complete silence. Captain Evans's ship began moving away from the station without waiting for a response. "Wait," Chairman Vextar called desperately. "We need to discuss this. We can change. We can offer you equal partnership, full voting rights, anything you want." The message was complete, Captain Evans replied. "There is nothing more to discuss." "But the galaxy is falling apart without you," pleaded High Counselor Thesana. "Our medical systems are failing. Our infrastructure is collapsing. Our scientific research has stagnated. We need your help." "You have managed for millions of years without human assistance," Captain Evans said. "I am confident you will find solutions that work for you." The ship accelerated toward the edge of the system. Within minutes, it had activated some kind of drive system that made it simply vanish. No energy signature, no spatial distortion, no trace that it had ever existed. The council members stared at empty space where impossible technology had just demonstrated humanity's complete independence from anything they could offer. Chairman, Vextar's final log entry recorded that night captured the full scope of their realization. We believed we were teaching children. Instead, we were holding back teachers. The humans have left us behind, not in anger, but in disappointment. We are alone now with the consequences of our arrogance. The revelation sparked immediate changes throughout the galaxy. Long-range scanners confirmed that human activities extended far beyond anything previously imagined. Energy signatures suggested that humanity had built structures around hundreds of stars. Communication intercepts indicated contact with species that the Council had never encountered. More disturbing were the reports of human ships appearing in other galaxies entirely. The technology gap was not just significant, it was absolute. While the Council had been debating mining rights and trade regulations, humanity had been preparing to explore the entire universe. The political consequences were swift and devastating. The Altarian Republic announced its withdrawal from the Council, citing the organization's failure to recognize and retain valuable members. The Zephyrian Federation began secret research programs aimed at understanding human technology. The Kethani Collective simply stopped participating in Council activities altogether. Individual species began following humanity's example. The young Deltarian civilization, which had been denied Council membership for being too inexperienced, simply disappeared one day. Their ships vanished from Council space without explanation. Long-range scans detected them building colonies in the direction humanity had gone. The Proximan traders, who had been restricted to limited trade agreements because of their primitive economic systems, packed up their operations and left. They took with them the most efficient cargo handling methods in the galaxy and knowledge of trade routes that the Council had never bothered to map. Within 2 years of the human message, 7 species had followed humanity's lead by leaving Council space entirely. They had learned the lesson that the Council was too proud to accept, that cooperation worked better than hierarchy, and that new ideas were more valuable than old traditions. The Great Galactic Council, which had once been the pinnacle of interstellar civilization, found itself governing an increasingly empty territory. The most innovative species had left to find partners who valued their contributions. The most adaptable civilizations had moved on to explore possibilities that the Council could not imagine. In the end, the Council's greatest achievement had been teaching the galaxy's younger species that they did not need permission to be great. Humanity had graduated from their tutelage and moved on to become teachers themselves. The students had surpassed their instructors and were now showing others that the universe was bigger than anyone had dared to dream. The galaxy was learning to live without the species that had made everything work. Some learned faster than others. Some chose to follow humanity's example and seek new frontiers. Others remained behind, clinging to the familiar structures of the past while wondering what they could have accomplished if they had been brave enough to treat their partners as equals instead of students.